Welcome to Inside the Numbers. It is Monday, September what? 25th? 25th. All right. Let's make sense of the polling. Man, that was fun, right? 24 hours, 48 hours. Imagine if your last name is Langer, right? You must have had a hell of a couple of days. Listen, I want to say this though real quick before we get on to, and then of course we're gonna have Joe Ken on, the great Joe Ken, to talk about this crazy budget stuff, this back and forth with Jim Jordan and Matt Gaetz, and then with Maria Bartiromo. I want to ask him about that because it's rare for somebody to change their mind or be persuaded by an argument somebody else makes in this day and age. And that's because, I mean, if we're being honest with ourselves, so many are just really bad faith actors. You couldn't convince them no matter what you threw in their face. It doesn't matter what evidence, how impenetrable your reason or your logic is. If somebody believes something because they believe something. For instance, if you're still a DeSantis influencer out there making the argument that DeSantis is more electable than Donald Trump, like, you cannot be penetrated by data and evidence. Like, you just can't be. You have an idea in your head and you can't let go of it because it threatens to break your worldview. By the way, that's a inherent characteristic of a Democrat. All right. And that's just truth. I'm not kidding. I mean, all the high profile cases Barnes and I have worked on for years. We've been doing this. It's amazing to me. I saw a Molly Hemingway tweet, that if you read the Washington Post or the New York Times, you're like one of the most ignorant people in the country. And she's absolutely right. We actually test what are your sources of information. And from hands up, don't shoot, folks. You could tell someone who believed hands up, don't shoot to blue in the face that here we have African-American witnesses telling us this never happened. And in fact, Michael Brown assaulted Officer Darren Wilson and tried to take his firearm. His friend catered under cross-examination and recanted and admitted to lying. Hands up, bro. Don't shoot, bro. Don't shoot, bro. No matter what, you just can't get it out of your head. If you are an MSNBC watcher, you are never going to accept the fact that Kyle Rittenhouse did not go halfway across the country like Rambo with an automatic weapon to like hose down peaceful protesters. You're never going to be convinced otherwise. And, that's rare in this day and age to see what happened when Maria Bartiromo happened. So curious what Joe Kent's take is on that. Also, of course, the spending in Ukraine. We have idiots in the Canadian Parliament giving not one, but two standing ovations to a Nazi. I mean, this is just totally insane. All right. And then, of course, we have the polling, which everyone flipped their lid about. Ironically, here we are now Monday, and there are a slew of them. So after calling the ABC poll an outlier, which I can explain to you, I have a theory as to why ABC is now so bullish on Trump, and more so than even others showing him with a lead. Because look, we got Hart Research out. The Messenger now is Trump +5. This is not, I'm the friggin' outlier at Trump with Trump +1. I'm the outlier, Laura. I'm such a grifter, right? Grifter. Shill. But there are things about the ABC News Washington Post poll that worked against Republicans, including Donald Trump, for years. They have a long track record of grossly overstating Democratic support. As we get closer to the election, it'll be curious to see what happens because their methodology does adjust as we get closer to the election. You might have noticed the messenger poll out today, conducted by Harvard Harris, is roughly, when you include strong and leaning independents, which you should because there aren't 42% of independents in the country. It's actually D plus 1, and Trump leads by 5. The country is not going to be D plus anything in 2024. It's not. In 2022, it was a fairly Republican electorate. In 2020, it was a fairly Republican electorate, including in some of the Rust Belt states. Pennsylvania was R plus 1. Florida was like R plus 8. The ABC News Washington Post poll is actually R plus 4. All right. So here we have, they just updated to their new average here. Let me pop it up there. All right. So what I am more concerned about overall is the trend. All right. I can try to explain to you something that I read in the methodology statement in ABC News, which I'll pop up here in a second. Where are you? Where are you? I read it before. There it is. Full. If they say full charts, I guess people in major media just don't have to release legit full-blown crosstabs like we do anymore. I guess that just doesn't have to happen anymore. Anyway, I'll read it to you and you'll see. But I'm more concerned about the trend here, obviously, going back to after Biden was even elected. It was close. And then Biden, it really ballooned out for Biden. Then they started trading off, but Biden clearly had a higher upside, and now that is not the case anymore. Trump, in the beginning of April 2023, really started to, post some pretty historically large leads in the average, and then it traded back to Biden a little bit. Now the country has had time to digest. And by the way, this right here, there were 2 polls that caused this. And even back in February, it was mostly Trump leading in these polls until there were 2 very large outliers, which nobody said anything about. Susquehanna, Biden plus 13, and I believe Quinnipiac was like Biden plus 9 or something. Biden plus 6. That's what changed the leaderboard. Now, though, we can see this trend right here is very, very obvious. Over the weekend, I was thinking, well, this could go back either way, or headed into it, really. This could go back either way. Our race tightened quite a bit. I can show you our trend. Trump still had a lead, but it tightened. And now you can see that it really has started to balloon out here. All right, so I'm more concerned about the trend than anything else. You have to understand, this is the ABC News Washington Post poll. I have to just say this before we get into the nitty-gritty of this, folks. Nobody said a damn thing when they published their final Hillary Clinton plus 12. Nobody said a damn thing when they published their final Joe Biden plus 12. Nobody said anything when their final in Wisconsin was Joe Biden plus 17. And you have Nate Cohn from the New York Times out there pressuring them, effectively leading the pressure campaign to get Mr. Langer to change his methodology that the ABC News Washington Post poll has had published on ABC News for years. For years. And Nate's entire argument, along with Amy from Crackhead Political Report and the rest of them, is that, kudos for releasing a plus 6, when everybody else was showing something very different. But a plus 10 with some of these internals is really suspect. No, what would have been suspect is if they spiked the poll, or if they succeed in this pressure campaign and they redo a poll, even though they didn't conduct a poll since May, and they redo another one almost immediately, which shows a very different result. I can actually explain Mr. Langer's results pretty easily. But before we get into that, we cannot allow the Larry Sabatos and the Nate Cohns of the world to get away with what they got away with. It is very disturbing to me that a so-called pollster at the New York Times would make the argument that a poll should change their methodology simply because they are not publishing results in line with them. What he is effectively arguing is for herding, or when I was coming up, it was called mirroring. Five Turd Fake made the term herding a little bit more famous, but in the actual business where people are actually pollsters for their actual profession, we used to call it mirroring. And it's when you change how you weight or something in order to get closer results to everyone else. That is exactly what you don't want to do. If we did that, and it's funny because pollster from Rasmussen and several other pollsters I spoke with yesterday, we were all just chuckling because some of us have been right when the world was not. If we would have done what Nate Cohen is arguing a Langer research should do, then we would never have been right when everybody else was wrong. Nate Cohen, he didn't have anything to say about the Biden plus 17 in Wisconsin in 2020 because that was pretty close to his result. Biden plus 11. Joe Biden barely won the state of Wisconsin by 2/10 of a percentage point, and he did it because they illegally counted ballots. I mean, that aren't legal ballots, folks. They claimed 200,000 people claimed indefinitely confined status erroneously. Drop boxes are now illegal. They were never legal. COVID was never a legitimate way to claim that exemption. And just those two things alone could have swayed the entire election. Forget about the fact that Democrats in certain offices in certain county were giving Democratic operatives real-time data to track down their ballots using vendors for free, giving them for free. It's called an in-kind campaign contribution, but what the hell? Who cares, right? Herding got Nate a 10-point miss. I don't think I've ever had a 10-point miss. Have I ever had a 10-point miss? What's the worst miss? Arizona in 2020, which is not even a miss. Pennsylvania pissed me off, though. That's all. I blame Mehmet Oz for that. I do. Because all the votes were there. They just didn't go out and get them. They just didn't go out and get them. I think my son wants to be on the show. Laura said, no. Locals can hang out with locals, but he can't hang out with everyone. It'd be some, it's not safe. But anyway, here's problems with the critics of the ABC News Washington Post poll. One, let me read this. And actually, let me pull this up so you can read it. And I went over some of this with locals. All right. But again, you don't change your methodology to herd to other pollsters. That's outrageous. And I cannot believe I saw a pollster from a major media outlet like the New York Times actually make that argument. And then Larry and your tiny ass crystal balls didn't say a damn thing in 16 or 20 when these people were pumping out the most ridiculous results. And they weren't alone. Even when some people had Biden up a little bit in a state like Georgia, Quinnipiac pumps out a Biden plus 10 or something ridiculous. Not a peep. Not a peep. And here also is something that's a dirty little secret. Here's a dirty little secret. There should be outliers. The rule of thumb before we got into this crazy era where outliers are a bad thing. Do that. My kid is Laura's literally chasing my son in between all the camera stuff. It's kind of cute. I'll be honest with you. It's kind of cute. I know he can't be there, but it's kind of adorable. Yeah. Roro, you got his please. Why don't mommy sit with you and then you don't have to worry about knocking the camera over? How about you just sit on the other side? Yeah, right there. Mommy, you can pull up a seat. Why don't you pull up a seat? I think it's kind of cute. I like it. I'm sorry, guys. I know. And he's getting a pouty face. All right. Outliers are a good thing. The rule of thumb, 1 every 20, every 25 polls, you should have an outlier. This was one of the things that was deeply, deeply suspect in both 2016 and in 2020. Like Robert Cahaly and I in 16 weren't outliers, all right? We were just people who had something totally different results and were arguing that their methodology was bad. It's not the same as we're all generally in the same ballpark and then one, boom, pops out something that's crazy, all right? Outliers show that there's legitimate collection going on. It should give you deep cause for concern, or cause for deep concern, I should say, that there were no Trump plus 10s in Ohio, that there were no Trump plus 6s in Florida. There were no Trump plus 4s in North Carolina. There were no Trump plus 10s in Iowa. And even though some of the race got down to being pretty close, there were no outliers that ever favored the Republican candidate. And that should raise your BS meter should have gone off. And it's something we talk about. It's a good thing that there are outliers. And you don't change your methodology because you hit the 1 in 20 rule or 1 in 25 rule. That's insane. The fact there were no outliers in 2020, especially in 2020, show you that they were doing that on purpose. Whether it was subconscious or not, it was on purpose. And after reading Nate Cohen's thread, he basically just proved everything I told the New York Post after 2020 to be correct. That to them, it's not really about accuracy. It's about being with the herd and the cool kids. That's not the job of a public pollster. That's not the job of any pollster. You want to give your client, if they're private surveys, you want to give them accurate information. Your job is to be correct, even when it's difficult, even when it's hard. And Rasmussen responded to that thread. He did exactly right. You know, some of us who have better track records in these elections, we don't sit there and gawk at your results and see whether or not we're in line with you. We test and then trust our own methodology. It's just outrageous. I mean, that's no small name. That's Nate Cohen at the New York Times. 5 turd shit fake gives him an A rating. I think an A+. It's outrageous. Outrageous. Gillum +8. All right. So let's look at something that we could be, on like professional about, and actually look at what is possibly going on here, because I think I see it, and I think I see it crystal clear. Here's the problem for the critics of the survey. Additionally, survey respondents who say they voted in 2020 report having supported Biden over Trump by 50 to 46%, very close to the actual outcome, 51 to 47. Here you can see where they're talking about the survey was conducted using ABC Polls long-standing methodology, which you can click on and read. And it'll tell you when it changed over time. So they used to just call landlines years and years and years ago. Then they even, 2008 or 9 or something, started adding some other component. By 2013, they had a set number of cell phones that they would include. I mean, it's very detailed about when they made changes and when they didn't. Demographic results are typical, so are partisans. 25% Democrat, 25% Republican, 42 independent, but 41 Democrat or independents who lean toward the Democratic Party, 45 Republican, or, those who lean. So it was really an R+4, 45 or 41, 45 DR, right? And again, there's nothing, it's an R+4. Folks, if any poll right now gives you a D+3 or above, they're smoking crack or something. Like, I don't know what they're doing. They have a major problem. The country has shifted to the right. It has. Remember when we first got out of Joe Biden's election, we were around D+7, something like that. And we can go back and look at the partisan tracker. That was the honeymoon period, and then it evaporated. Anyway, again, that's difficult to deal with. Here's what I really think it comes down to. Trump and Biden results are essentially identical among those who report being registered to vote, 52 to 42. Some polling analysts focus on this group, even though there's more than a year to register, an activity on which political campaigns expend great effort. We focus on the general population at this stage to give all adults a voice, regardless of their current registration status. That's it. I've been beating it like a dead horse. This is the first cycle I have ever seen in my lifetime, and in the modern era, I went back and looked, where adults and those who were, unlikely registereds are actually more favorable to Republicans than likely voter models. Republicans are always the ones who are hoping turnout is low. Oh, please, I hope people who are 30 to 40 don't vote. Oh, please, I hope a lot of women stay home. I hope black people just were too lazy to go vote today. I hope Hispanics don't vote. That's like the Republican strategy of the Bush wing of the party. Like, I hope people don't participate because if they do, they don't like me and I will lose this election. It is the total opposite with Donald Trump as the standard bearer of the Republican Party. Why do I explicitly say Trump here? Because we've been polling these groups. Suffolk has been polling these groups. Premise Data has been polling these groups. For instance, in the last round of non-registered, Trump was winning them by 20 points. DeSantis was winning them by 2. That's it. Of those who are registered but are unlikely, Trump, that lead increases to 3-1. And when you ask people, those groups, who could motivate you to vote, whether they're registered and unlikelies or non-registered and eligibles, 10-1 advantage, Donald Trump. 10-1. What does this mean? In a sample size this small, it's only 800 and something plus. That is too small for our standards at Big Data Poll. I would never allow this to be published. That's just me. They've been doing it like this for years. I understand principles of randomization. I get it. Hispanics are a very demographically diverse group, for instance, and to have that small of a subsample for me is just not good enough. When you have to combine 18 to 34 years old or 18 to 30 even, or whatever it may be. Actually, 18 to 30 is not that bad, but 18 to 35, when you have to do that, in my mind, you did not talk to enough people within those subgroups. That's why when we release our results, we give 2 age demographic examples. They match the exit polls. Age, which is basic, 18 to 29, 30 to 44, 45 to 64, and 65 plus. And then we give an age detail, which is 18 to 24, 25 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49, 50 to 64, 65 to 74, 75 plus. Because we have spoken with enough of them that we can give that within a reasonable subgroup sampling error, defined. They're not doing that. So it is very possible, looking at these results, and in fact likely, and this is probably what contributed to ridiculous overstatements of Democratic leads in the past. It is very likely that their younger sample was packed, and a lot of their non-whites were packed with these 2 groups that I've been telling you about. They were disproportionately represented in some of these subgroups that everybody had a hard time with and flipped out about. How do I know? Because the independent swing is not that big. People act like Biden, who won them by 8, can't go on to lose them by 9. Of course they can. The suburbs, which went for Biden by only 2 points. I don't know if you know that or not, but the suburbs only went for Biden by a few points, folks. The fact that they could swing to Trump plus 8 is not at all impossible or even unlikely or unimaginable. Now, Hispanics, Trump is winning 50 to 44. That's an eye popper. But again, Fox has him at 45%. The New York Times has him just over 40. We have him just over 40. I think he can hit 45. I think he's going to beat Bush's margin from 04, which is a disputed margin. Closer to 40%. Bush did not get 44% of the Hispanic. Doesn't matter, because I think Trump is going to surpass him anyway. If people would just read and stop talking about things that they don't really understand, then maybe we would have a lot less garbage. I know we call it the silly season for a reason, but maybe we would have a lot less garbage floating all over the internetosphere, or whatever you want to call it, if people would just stop talking about things they don't know anything about. Or at least talk about it. That's great, but don't talk as if you're some kind of an authority if you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Which led to this little back and forth. If you don't believe this poll, you don't believe Trump's up by 10, but you believe Nikki Haley's up by 6. Which Rust Belt vote is Nikki Haley going to win? Which state? Ditto Ron DeSantis. Which state is Ron DeSantis going to win? I actually got an answer from the town hall crowd. Wisconsin. Really? Let's go over it again. Let me waste more of my time to dispel another ridiculous myth that all my readers and listeners mostly know already. 1984, Reagan Mondale. Look at the map and look at it carefully. 1988 is when the Bush wing got their butts kicked by Dukakis. Reagan carries it and carries it pretty comfortably until his stupid vice president, the loser from the Bush family, gets his ass kicked by a guy who is the weakest crime presidential candidate ever. Michael Dukakis was one of the worst candidates I have ever seen in my entire life, and yet Bush lost Wisconsin to him. Now, remember those maps in your mind. To the left, you will see Trump's map. To the right, you will see Romney's map. Look familiar? Do they look familiar to you at all? 30-something years later, and you can almost identically overlap them. With the exception of a few things here and there, it's almost identical. Mitt Romney ran with hometown boy Paul Ryan on his ticket, and he lost Paul Ryan's own county. They lost Kenosha. They did terrible in Racine. Not Trump. So here's the problem, and here's the false logic here. They think because Donald Trump won these states. All right, and here's another one. Here's Ohio. They think because Donald Trump won Wisconsin, Ohio. And by the way, here's issue 1. Did real good with that. Here's Iowa, 31 pivot counties. Here's Pennsylvania. They think because Donald Trump won these states, they have a snowball's chance in hell of winning them themselves, when all the evidence to the contrary exists. They cannot win any of these states, including Wisconsin. They will get annihilated in lumberjack country, even in the Southeast, in the so-called suburbs that are going to swing back for them, over Donald Trump. We keep hearing, we heard it in 16, we heard it in 2020. And then Trump goes on to carry wow anyway. Not Mitt Romney. Not their candidates. Not Kelly. Not Hagedorn. And when Hagedorn had his brief for speech, he needed, again, an absolute collapse in Democratic turnout to do it. They're not going to collapse in turnout, folks. So you better figure out how you're going to earn 85 million votes. There's only one way to do it. You will lose like this. They're making the same false and phony argument that many Democrats made during and after the era of Barack Obama, who carried a traditional right-leaning Rust Belt state like Indiana, Midwestern state, and damn near carried Missouri, was very close. And they thought, well, you know what? Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton first we heard about. She's so far ahead. Is it not possible that she could even take Indiana from Donald Trump, that she could take Missouri? There were polls out from Remington Research showing Jeff Rose people, showing Biden within 4 points of Donald Trump in Missouri, which he went on to win by double digits overwhelmingly. Same argument. Doesn't work that way. You couldn't copy and paste Reagan's voters to George Herbert Walker Bush, and you cannot copy and paste Barack Obama's voters to Hillary Clinton, and you cannot copy and paste Donald Trump's voters to Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis or any of the other Keebler elves. Hard pass. That's all you're going to hear all over the Rust Belt. Hard pass. No, thank you. Hard pass. And that's that. So here we have, again, there's another one coming. As I don't know if I should blow it up, but There's another one that should be out soon. It's like a Trump +3. But whenever, yeah, I think I'll take a break while Joe, gets settled in. Oh no, that's right. I wanted to read this because this was great how they did it. Frankly, honestly, it was great how Newsmax did this. I've never seen a news outlet call their own poll an outlier, and yet that is what the Washington Post and ABC did all day yesterday. Dropped a poll in the middle of the night without the headline. They buried the Trump +10 3 or 4 paragraphs in. The response to the poll was less credible than the results of the poll themselves. All right. All right. Let's read this real quick before we may take commercial before we bring on Joe. Harris X. Trump beating Biden by 5 points. The messenger poll, by the way, has been going back and forth. Trump +1, Biden +1. It's been very close. This represents a stretching of Trump's legs in this poll, which we have not seen this year. Just one day after the Washington Post ABC News poll called its own poll an outlier for having Donald Trump leading Joe Biden by 10 points in a potential 2024 race, another poll has come in with a strong Trump lead over the incumbent. In a hypothetical head-to-head, Trump leads Biden by 5, 46-41, in the Harris X poll released Monday, which is well outside the small margin of error, plus or minus 1.8%. It is. They're like us. They poll large samples. Notably, all of the recent Real Clear Politics polling average polls from September have Trump leading Biden, or at least in a virtual or statistic tie. Inside the Harris X numbers, Trump leads Biden by 8 points among independents and 10 points among third-party voters. This is a big deal. I got to stop and say this. And Laura and I were just talking about this morning. A lot of people made a big deal, rightfully so, in 2020 over Biden's lead with third-party voters that were not going to do what they did in 2016, vote for a Gary Johnson or a Jill Stein. This is one of the reasons why Joe Biden is in serious, serious trouble. When it comes to a state like Wisconsin or PA, this is going to hurt him and hurt him bad. Okay. Trump now leads with that vote. Joe Biden had a similar lead, 2-1, 3-1, sometimes even bigger, but he was leading with those third-party voters. This time, Trump leads with them. If they're not voting third party, and they're this crucial block that are third party, but I'm not going to vote for a third party. I'm going to vote for one of the top two-party system candidates. They are going for Trump this time. That happened in 2016. Of those who did cast a two-party vote share, they went for Trump. They went for Biden in 2020, and now they're going for Trump again. Even in our polling that is tightened, that is still the case. It's a bad sign for Joe Biden. All right. Biden remains 16 points underwater on his approval rating as a net 56% of the disapprove the job he is doing and on 40% approve, which, by the way, is right in line with all the other polls. This is the problem everyone has by calling the ABC News poll an outlier, or just outwardly dismissing it. It is still in the same ballpark with approvals and disapprovals and 2020 votes and, their vote margin from 2020. It's in that ballpark. I just think that because they are surveying a different population, that group of very pro-Trump, unlikelies, and adults were packed in with some of those demographics, which should tell you something. It should tell you Trump could romp them. He could romp Biden. If they got out those voters, this would be like an election over at 9:30 at night. We could all go home. Only 8% of Republicans, 9% of third-party voters, and 33% of independents approve of Biden. Trump remains a 42-point runaway in the GOP presidential primary. Trump 56, DeSantis 14, Nikki Haley 5, Vivek 5, Mike Pence 2, Tim Scott 2, Fatso 2, Asa 1, Larry 1, Doug 1, Ryan Binkley 1. Doug, by the way, when you're sending your text messages, make them 10 DLC compliant, and then they'll actually go through. Will Hurd 1, Secretary of State Corey Stapleton 1, Perry Johnson 0, Francis Suarez, who was out 0, And there was 1% choosing someone else and 7% that was undecided. 1,089 Republicans, 1,114 Democrats, 748 independents, and 64 third party conducted between the 13th to the 19th, 6-day rolling, 1.8 percentage point. And I know exactly where this panel came from. It's a very good panel, so it is absolutely worth paying attention. All right. Yeah, I'm ready to bring in Joe whenever he's ready. Let's drop this. Bring in Joe when he's ready to go. I'm dying to get into this conversation with our guest. How long do I got, Joe, Laura? 30 minutes? Sweet. All right, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, running in the 3rd Congressional District in Washington for the Republican nomination, Joe Kent. Joe, welcome back to Inside the Numbers. As always, your mic is muted, though. Whenever you're ready to rock and roll, we can go. There he is.
I don't know what's going on with my camera. It's not working for some reason.
That's cool, brother. I can give you a little avatar if you want, but yeah, it's sure. All right. We can deal. Thanks for coming back to Inside the Numbers. How you been, brother?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me back on.
Anytime. I was, dying to talk to you about this as it's, this is happening right now with the budget deal. I'm kidding. My son's over here. I guess my son's got a question for Joe. 4-year-old's got a question. Okay.
Go, Joe, go.
I was going to play the clip, but I think everybody's seen it by now. And, I'm sure you have as well. Matt Gaetz goes on after Jim Jordan on Mornings with Maria Bartiromo, and Jim Jordan and others like Chip Roy have been arguing that Matt is really kind of like sabotaging the ship. And, we're not going to get these gains because of, his desire to do individual spending bills. To me, Joe, it's like, I personally say I got to agree with Matt that who cares about a committee on weaponization if you still cut the check for government to be funded to be weaponized against political opponents. I'm just curious, but I understand you have to govern too. So I'm just curious, what your thoughts are on that, and what are your thoughts on what's going on in general?
I think in general, we just have to realize that we're past the point where we can continue to say, hey, the status quo is working for this nation. We're $33 trillion in debt. All that Matt Gaetz and the other patriots, the other members of the Freedom Caucus are arguing for is individual spending bills to give the American people some transparency and a robust debate on how our government's spending money. I mean, like right now, to say that we can continue to run $2 trillion annual deficits, the Biden administration every year is saying that, hey, we're just going to spend $7 trillion, even though we only take in $5 trillion, and that's somehow sustainable. I just think that's got to be a bright red line. I mean, conservatives, as long as I've been politically aware, have been saying that, hey, we're the party of smaller government. We want to shrink government. They keep saying that over and over again, but you can't shrink government by passing these massive omnibus bills that run national deficits. And then every year after the 6-week break, them coming back and saying, golly, it's just too complicated for us to get, individual appropriations bills done. We just need a CR, which everyone should know at this point. A CR is just a copy and paste essentially of the omnibus bill. It says, well, adjust for inflation, but let's keep doing what we're doing. And I think the point is we can't keep doing what we're doing. We're going to have these debates if we want to maintain our nation at all.
Joe, if Democrats had a majority the size of the slim majority that Republicans have right now, is there any doubt in your mind that they would grind this government to a halt to get what they want?
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind whatsoever. I mean, when the Democrats had any kind of majority, any ounce of power, they completely and totally use it to their advantage. I mean, many people have pointed out at this point in Nancy Pelosi's Congress, they had called, Donald Trump Jr. in multiple times, for all these nonsensical charges around the J6 committee. They had already, I think, put, Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro in handcuffs. Like, these guys aren't playing around, and we're just now getting to the impeachment inquiries. And that's good. I'm glad we're getting there. But at the same time, if we're not willing to go in and say to the DOJ, we're going to defund Jack Smith, we're going to actually start holding you guys accountable using the power of the purse strings, then we're fundamentally unserious. And the way that you do that is by individual appropriations.
Yeah, I sometimes do this as like a little thought exercise, that how they would respond and how they would reply. And then, they kind of do something that takes away the hypothetical in my mind. So Here's Hillary Clinton, and I'm not going to play the clip. I'll spare everybody that voice. But here's Hillary Clinton returning again to the Russia collusion hoax. Like, she's got a new one. She's kind of manifesting that makes sense with the old one. And to me, that tells me they think they're going to lose, and they're already putting the stakes in the ground, to have their new narrative about how this election was lost on their side. And they're going to fight. Like, if Trump was to win and return to the White House, they're going to fight like hell. They're not going to roll over. They're not going to fight with their leaders over whether or not they're going to take a meaningful action, instead of just everything's for show, Joe. Everything's for show. We're going to hold a hearing and yell at some people. They had Merrick Garland in the hot seat. He perjured himself, Joe. Do you agree? He perjured himself over Weiss.
Yeah, I mean, multiple times. I mean, Merrick Garland's basically running cover for the Biden administration, whether we're talking about what's happening at the southern border, with the way the illegal immigrants are being flown to different urban centers, or whether the fact that Hunter Biden is compromised 6 ways to Sunday, the Biden administration, the intelligence community cooperating with big tech to try and get that out of the narrative for the last election. Look, he's perjured himself over and over again. So is Mayorkas. The Biden administration, if you just look at everything that's been discovered about how deeply compromised they are with China and with Ukraine, again, if you play the scenario where if the shoe is on the other foot, there would already be criminal charges right now against any Republican. I mean, let alone Donald Trump. So it's definitely time for us to get serious. Look, all you're going to see the Democrats do, and you pointed out Hillary Clinton's bringing up Russia collusion again. Democrats have no policies whatsoever to run on. My opponent says I'm a crazy extremist probably every single day. That's because she doesn't want to talk about the fact that she voted for the wide open southern border. Fentanyl's killing folks in our district at record numbers. The inflation is destroying working families. I mean, they can't talk about issues, so all they're going to do is call us crazy. So it's time for us to be the serious ones. I think that the proposal being presented by Matt Gaetz and the Freedom Caucus, it shows that we are the serious adults in the room, because we're talking about how we actually fund our government and how we actually govern. And these are the discussions I think that actually bring over moderates to our side.
When that debt bomb goes off, and debt does speak to moderates, the national debt, it's something that it's a right way to talk about it to get their attention. But when that debt bomb goes off, everyone's going to pretend that they agreed with Matt Gaetz and that they were fighting against these deficit spending bills, and they were fighting against the overall debt. They're gonna try anyway. And if Republicans aren't on the right side of this when that bomb goes off, they're going to pay. They're going to pay, because they're the ones who, Democrats never painted themselves as fiscally responsible, or, so they won't have anybody to answer to as being, for the hypocrisy of it all. Republicans will, because they're the ones who said that, who made that claim, who portrayed themselves that way. And honestly, at this point, they're the ones who deceived voters, who thought they were getting somebody, like you said, the adult in the room. Speaking of which, the Ukraine spending, I don't even know where to go with this, because you served. I know, obviously you had a hell of a career. I don't know if you saw it. I'm hoping you did, because I have not obviously supported spending for Ukraine. Even, I don't care if it's non-lethal, lethal, humanitarian at this point. If you can't have any accountability, Joe, where the money's going, then, I mean, you can't send money to a corrupt country like that. But it's worse than that. Did you see last week the footage of the drone, which they were cheerleading? It's like one of Ukraine's propaganda Twitter accounts posted this video of a wounded Russian soldier who was hit with an ordnance from a drone, and he's like begging them to stop and surrendering, and they just toy with him, and they're dropping the ordnance near him, not enough to kill him and put him out of his misery, Joe, just close enough to continuously hurt him. This pisses me off bad. Everyone knows you don't want to. How could I put this the right way, Joe? You don't, who the enemy is, but as an American soldier, you still, treat someone who's surrendered. We have a totally different code, and yet we're funding that, and it just bothers me really bad, because don't call Vladimir Putin a war criminal and then celebrate doing that stuff to a Russian soldier. It made me sick, man, and honestly ashamed. It made me ashamed, and we're still funding it.
I mean, a lot of folks who've never experienced war before, I mean, they're shocked when they see things like this, or they buy into this Marvel Comics type of narrative where like the Russians are so bad that anything that we do to them or the Ukrainians do to them, it's what they deserve. And what
It's
people
just,
don't realize is like
yeah,
both sides do things like this to each other in war. It is horrific. This is why war should be avoided at all costs. And I mean, this entire Ukraine debacle, I mean, I really think the narrative that Ukraine was going to be able to push back the Russians is completely and totally imploding. We're spending billions over there. I don't think we even have an accurate count. We hear different figures thrown out there here and there. I think the 130 to 170 range is pretty low. I think it's closer to 200 billion when you look at the grand totals. And Ukraine's nowhere closer to winning because it's obvious Russia's just a much bigger country. But there's no responsible folks that are saying like, hey, we need to get to the negotiating table and stop this killing, stop these atrocities like we just saw. They're happening on both sides. And the whole thing is horrific because if you say, well, this side did an atrocity and then therefore the other side did an atrocity, it's a never-ending cycle, and all it leads to is escalation. But now we have the Biden administration. I mean, there's so many different layers to this, but it's all very interlinked. The Biden administration is now saying that basically they're going to continue to give a blank check to Ukraine. They're going to include not just Abrams tanks, but they're also going to include long-range missiles. And this is extremely dangerous because right now the Ukrainians are running out of people to throw at this conflict. So their only play, if I was running Ukraine right now, my only play would be to attempt to get NATO deeper involved, to actually get real commitments from NATO, to possibly get some advisors on the ground. I saw an article from Foreign Policy Magazine, which has a good finger on the pulse of the DC war machine. And they were arguing in foreign policy to put U.S. advisors, Green Berets, special operations guys, behind enemy lines to advise Ukrainians. And so if you can get your long-range missiles to start attacking Russians and you can get some sort of a tit for tat going and you can get some Americans involved in this, then you can actually prop up this scam that is Ukraine. And this is at a time when we're running out of money. Look, we're paying for Ukrainian pensions. We're paying for their first responders. We're underwriting we're giving out small business loans. There was a report about a month ago about how we're paying for Ukrainian social security pensions at a time when every 5 minutes the Democrats accuse us of getting ready to starve grandma. The whole scenario is just preposterous and completely irresponsible.
Yeah, and you took the words right out of my mouth. What I was going to ask was this. I mean, at some point, and John Mearsheimer, he's got a Substack. I read it anytime he posts something on it. He's a foreign policy guy. And people who don't know who he is, he wrote The Tragedy of Great Power Politics, which we read on our book club. But he's been he's a realist. So he's been, right more than wrong. And I mean, he's just putting the figures up there. At this rate, Joe, there's just no way. Ukraine is being bled dry of, their able, capable fighting bodies. And at this rate, there's no way we're going to end up anywhere but a place where we all know we were going to end up. We need American advisors. And then from there, Joe, it becomes not just a couple not just a couple ODAs over there advising, but engaging. And then we need units to support their efforts on the ground. This is the way it's going to go until it builds and escalates and builds and escalates. And we're going to come to a point where people are going to say, well, there's been life expended. There's been money expended. We can't stop now or else it was all for nothing. That's how they do this. And there's, even with American involvement, I'm not sure that's a real good idea, even if we had a reason or if there was a vital national security interest there. I'm not sure we're ready for that. And that's really what I wanted to ask you. This military is not the military I remember, Joe. And I'm not sure we can fight Russians.
Yeah, what Biden's done, I mean, just to make the military way less effective between all the woke policies, the COVID vaccine, all of that, that's bad enough. But also, look, we've been fighting low-level counterinsurgency wars for quite a while. Yeah. I mean, there's still a good deal of our force that prepares for a conventional fight, but we are not ready for that. And look, at the end of the day, a conventional war against Russia would literally just be NATO countries and Russia lobbing nuclear weapons at each other until there had been such a massive loss of life on both sides that we either come to an agreement or that's it. That's the end of history. I mean, we have people right now in the national security establishment, retired generals, Petraeus, Ben Hodges last night on 60 Minutes, that are basically using the exact same rhetoric and logic and lies, frankly, that we used to get us deeper involved into Afghanistan nation building, into actually toppling the regime of Saddam Hussein and then staying engaged with, again, more nation building. They're using that exact same logic and rhetoric and really the same tactics, quite frankly, that they're attempting to apply them in Ukraine, and Ukraine is a completely different fight. And
Yep.
look, the stakes are so much higher. If everybody remembers how much of a disaster Afghanistan and Iraq were, and Vietnam, look, now we're messing around for nuclear power. And there's a lot of Republicans out there who like to say, like, I'm a Reagan Republican and we stand up to bullies and we go and fight. The last time that we took on a real power like Russia, we did not get directly engaged into conflict with them. Anytime this type of scenario played out during the Cold War, we had rational actors on both sides who said, "Hey, we need to take a time out and we need to lower the tensions. We need to get the Russian nuclear missiles out of Cuba. We'll take some out of Turkey." It was a back and forth, and really, we ultimately prevailed in the Cold War because what did we focus on? We focused on having a strong, independent U.S. economy. At this point right now, we've basically shipped all our manufacturing overseas to China. We've abused sanctions so much to the point where Russia and China have now combined. They are making a super alliance out of the BRICS and out of OPEC, taking away the ability for us to continue to leverage the dollar. When you combine that with the debt crisis that we're having here, it is clear that this is not sustainable, and we're heading down the road to a major, major disaster in our country.
They just shrugged that off. BRICS. I mean, that was just like a month or so ago. They just shrugged it off, as if this isn't a massive problem. We cannot. First of all, we should have been. Russia is in China's sphere of influence, unlike us. We should have used, them to counter China. And you don't have to look across the pond and say this is a great guy. That, and then I'll work with them. You use who's in your interest and have shared interests together. And Trump was beat over the head for wanting to reestablish decent relations with Russia. That was the smart move, not to push them into a balancing coalition that we have no prayer to balance against. I mean, they think American power is unlimited, Joe. It's crazy. And even you just said it before, that the strategies are outdated, and they are like thinking about things totally wrong. How they engineered that counteroffensive is essentially modeled as it was blitzkrieg, and it failed grossly. And I can't help, now that I can see the result of it, I sometimes go back and I listen to Petraeus, who did this interview with how successful this blitzkrieg was going to be, and how confident he was, and you could tell he really believed his own BS. He did.
Oh, yeah.
He totally believed. Yeah. Meanwhile, if you really go through the historical record of blitzkriegs, they don't really work out that well unless there are a grossly uneven fight, right? So you have the Germans who blitzkrieg against Poland and others that were weaker. It wasn't a fair fight, or what they call, this wasn't even close to that. I mean, who was in charge, Joe? If anything, it was a slightly unfair fight that favored the Russians. So you chose blitzkrieg? I mean, it's just unbelievable to me. And they're the ones who are making the decisions. They're the ones who are in power. And the truth is, they're not ready for this, man. They are not ready for this.
The only skill, with few exceptions, the only skill that the generation of generals that I fought under in the global war on terror, the only skill they actually have is being able to sell to Washington, D.C. why they need more time, more money, more troops. One more surge, one more counteroffensive. I mean, how many times have we heard this before? We're going to introduce, weapon system X, whatever it is, tanks, long-range ballistic missiles, more combat troops to stabilize the government in Afghanistan and teach them how to do good governance and build girls' schools. They've always got one more gimmick they're trying to sell. And at the end of the day, the only people that benefit from it, the people in those countries don't benefit. Go ask the Iraqis and the Afghans. Go ask the Ukrainians right now, after they've lost 400,000 of their best and brightest who are conscripted into this. The only people that benefit from this, it's defense contractors, and it builds more mansions along the Potomac, and it adds more stars to these guys' collars, and they all get cush jobs in some think tank or on the board of Raytheon later on. But look, they're when you really just break it down and you look at the results, it's always abysmal. So I have no idea why we're listening to these people, other than the fact that they are really just selling more of the status quo that benefits Washington, D.C. And you can tell exactly who's getting, fat checks from all the different defense contractors, because they're the ones out there in Congress and the Senate saying, hey, as long as it takes, we're going to stand with the Ukrainians. We might shut down the government. We might start cutting Americans short of the money their government owes them. But don't worry, we'll fund Ukraine. They're really saying the quiet part out loud. And that's what I think a lot of folks across the country are noticing now. They can really feel that their government is not prioritizing them. They're prioritizing this foreign war. And that seems to be very much the DC status quo.
And that's, I was gonna ask you about that. Your race was really close in 22, and that was without much help. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I really, I'm never gonna let some of the Republican leadership off the hook for what they did to some of the candidates in 22. It's like they would rather have had a smaller majority than have to deal with people like Matt Gaetz. Look, this is a great example of why I would always say that. The truth is, that they want to go along to get along, and people like you, candidates like you, and freshman congressmen and women like you, they're not going to do that anymore. So this district is one of these districts where your opponent cannot suffer too many people to have voters remorse. And she I mean, the way she's just signed completely on to this, everything. She doesn't change anything. So I know that's obviously going to go in your favor, but without giving away any kind of like trade secrets, what are you hearing on the ground, and then what are you kind of doing differently this time? Because I know we've talked about this before. You were always in favor of Republicans building a vote infrastructure, which I think they needed to lose in order to understand why that was so important. But what are you hearing that's different? And what are you guys doing that's different? It was so close, that race.
Yeah. So, I mean, number one, last time I took out a 12-year incumbent back by the full weight of the establishment in the primary, and our primaries are late. They're in August. So we had all that bloody primary and not enough time really to unify the Republican Party. So I'm spending a ton of time right now talking with a lot of Republicans who I know are conservatives. I know that we agree on probably 90% of the issues. They just supported one of the other candidates, in particular the incumbent last time. So doing that to unify the Republican Party, and what we're unifying around right now is just how radical the Democrats are. So, it's inflation, because that's stealing $9,000 per year from every single family. Wide open border. We're basically a border town because we've got Portland a stone's throw away from us to the south, and Seattle to the north, and I-5 running right through our district. So we're leading the country right now in fentanyl deaths. So crime's a big issue. Protection of children as well. I mean, Marie Perez, my Democratic opponent, voted to allow biological men into your daughter's dressing room and to compete against them in sports. So on these key issues, we're going to be able to really unify the Republican Party and unify conservative voters, and I think bring over a lot of independents. Obviously, the Democrats have their spin machine on their side. Every time there's an article written about her in the local media, they talk about how moderate she is. But really, we're going to highlight her record, unify the Republican side. We shouldn't have, knock on wood, but we shouldn't have a hard primary to get through, so that we can save all of our resources, and we can just really focus on taking down the Democrat.
Yeah, that was very different this time around than last time. Very different. And to all the people who say, and I got a couple in 2 minutes with you here. To all the people who say, these bruising primaries are good, they make a candidate stronger. First of all, that's just not true. It's just not true. It leaves them with less resources and less times, and the potential for fracturing the party. I know it's like one of those things you hear in Washington all the time, and you hear in the media repeated over and over again. But really, guys like me who do this for a living, looking at the empirical data, it's not true. That's why Joe Biden changed the schedule, so he didn't have a real competitor this year. It never works out well for the party, so they're moving to derail it. Where are you with the national primary that's going on right now? I mean, in my mind, Joe, I mean, this thing's over. There's just no way. It's not. This isn't George Bush in 99 or 2000. If you polled Bush, even when he had a lead over McCain, close to the one Trump had now, 20% of his voters were solid, right? Trump's been at like 80% solid from 2 months and rising. It's that these are voters who tell us there's no way I'm changing my mind. I'm done. That's it. I'm not persuadable. And that's the death knell. So I don't see the value in $100 million in the first quarter, moving into the second one now. We're in it. I don't see the value in another $100 million to spend against the guy who's going to win anyway. And by the way, who's leading, which we just went over in the segment before you, by historical numbers we've never seen before for a Republican candidate. So it doesn't make any sense to me. I'm curious where you're at on this.
No, I mean, like I've been a Trump supporter for a long time, gladly endorsed him. Look, at the end of the day, like I agree with you. Obviously, you look at these numbers all day, but I haven't seen anything that shows that there even is a primary. I mean, Trump is just up by so much. And when I go out there and I talk to to Republican voters. I mean, even people who 6-8 months ago who said that they were interested in other candidates or not interested in Trump anymore, they see that it's inevitable and they're prepared to vote for President Trump again. I mean, there was some debate, I think 8 months ago, that said, like, wouldn't DeSantis and Trump be a great team together? And DeSantis has been a good governor, so I understand why people feel that way. But I think people have to look beyond the primary and understand that all of us candidates are out there asking essentially the same pool of donors, the grassroots donors, not Wall Street or any of those guys that are funding some of the other candidates, the Democrats, but we're asking the same donors really for resources. And at the end of the day, President Trump, he has a legal fight that he has to worry about to literally stay out of jail because the DOJ is weaponized against him. But also, if he has to expend resources in this primary, that takes away from all the same donors. And then that takes away down ballot from candidates like myself. I spend most of my days talking to small dollar donors, people that see me on your show, on War Room. And a lot of them are just saying, like, hey, I can help you, but I can't help you as much as I did last time. And so these are guys that gave me $50, $100, and so now they're having to cut that down. And all we're doing is depriving other good candidates of resources. And also at the national level, look, I don't see why Republican leadership isn't saying, hey, we're going to call a lid on this primary. If things shake out differently when people go to the ballot box, fine. But they should be focusing their resources right now on ballot harvesting. They should be focusing their resources on building us our own Perkins Coie so that we're ready to go fight on election day in the courtroom, that we're not in a reactive mode when they start pulling all the nonsense that we know they're going to pull come election day. Just to me, it seems like we are in a scenario where we're wasting a ton of resources and energy and potentially even, making some wounds that won't be able to be healed come the general election. So the whole thing to me just seems counterproductive.
From your mouth to God's ears, man. I mean, there's a gold mine out there of new and some are new and not registered, and then others who are unlikely but are registered and just don't participate. It's a gold mine out there right now, an opportunity I've never seen for Republicans in my lifetime, and that should be the focus right now because. Not to, you always want to run like you're 10 points down, Joe. But I mean, I'm looking at these numbers. Democrats are out. They're out of gas. They have they have to wait for more white people to be educated and indoctrinated and credentialed in the institutional academia, in order to get new voters. They don't have any voter targets out there, not like Republicans. And that's what they should be focused on. Well, look, I know it's almost time. So tell people where they can go and support you. Before I let you go, I just want to congratulate you on your new nuptials. And of course, give my best to you and your family. But congratulations, Joe. You deserve it.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that. Definitely been blessed twice, first with my late wife and then again with Heather. So yeah, all praise to God. I really appreciate that, man. So if people want to support the campaign, please go to joekentforcongress.com. We're going to scramble right now into the quarter, trying to finish strong. So there's no donation too small. I run on small dollar donors. So joekentforcongress.com is the place to do that.
Well, all the best, Joe. Come back and see us. Let us know how things are going. And, best of luck. I'll see you soon.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Joe Kent, everyone. JoeKentForCongress.com. JoeKentForCongress.com. Go check it out. You know where his handle's in the video description right now. Go follow him on social media. Again, could you imagine if, Matt Gaetz had Joe Kent with him? This is the thing. I've been saying this for a long time. It's like Republican voters complain to me a lot about how their party isn't really isn't any better. And then they wonder why voters don't go out and vote for him and vote for them and the numbers they've gotten out and voted for Donald Trump. And that's because those people aren't dumb. They're not stupid. They know when they're being had, and until their ranks are replaced, and some of these Democrats who are claimed to be moderates, and she is not moderate. She hasn't said no once to first it was Pelosi, but now it's Hakeem Jeffries and whatever Schumer wanted across the hall. She hasn't said no once. I mean, it's a total scam until these people are replaced with people like Joe Kent and can go and help Matt Gaetz and others. It's just going to be a can kick ceremony. That's all it's going to be. But I guarantee you, when that debt bomb blows, because it's going to blow, we're not going to be exempt from history. And Joe Biden's weakening. Here's why what Joe and I were talking about is so important. With Joe Biden weakening our position around the world, weakening the petrodollar, weakening a negotiating hand. Peter Baker in the New York Times, of all people, not long ago said, there's a major difference between the Trump presidency and the Biden presidency. All this talk about putting the NATO alliance back together and re-strengthening the NATO alliance and again leading our allies in the world. There's nobody at the negotiating table. Donald Trump was always talking to someone. His administration was always talking to someone, trying to get a better deal here, a better deal there. It's silence until Blinken goes out and makes a fool out of himself, or Kirby goes out and makes a fool of himself. But nobody's actually out there grinding at the negotiating table. It's like so much for diplomacy. And my response to you, Peter, is this, because you're newspaper shilled for this guy. And now this is weakening the debt. We can deal with at least some if we're still the man on the top of the hill, if we're still, king of the hill. But when you weaken our position and you create a balancing coalition that puts us down in the kiddie pool, then people are going to they're going to start to pay attention to that debt. And that's when it's going to become problematic. And by the way, we're going into a recession next year. Americans already think they're in one, but by next year's forecast, the Bureau of Economic Analysis is not going to be able to hold it back. I mean, it is going to be for all to see. And that is going to hurt us globally. The only thing that saved us so far, and I'm serious about this, Laura, is that China has not been doing well. They're still enormously powerful. But because, the virus they unleashed on the rest of the world sent their manufacturing into decline. And by the way, so did Donald Trump with phase 1 and phase 2. Imagine if he got phase 3 through. How would the Chinese economy look then? But he weakened our hand here. And when that debt bomb goes off, because again, it will, watch all of these slimy scumbags pretend that they agreed with Joe Kent. They will pretend they were shoulder to shoulder with Matt Gaetz, fighting the fight. Watch. You watch. I mean, that's how politicians work. It's disgusting, but you watch. Should I take a break before I come back with the Harvard? Yeah, let's take a real quick break. I just went through a whopper of a tropical storm. At the last minute, it was supposed to go in. It was supposed to hit South Carolina a little bit more. Not that, you ever want to see it hit anybody. You don't. But at the last minute, you get the phone alert. This thing it's hooking north a little bit. You're about to get a direct hit. And I'm telling you, we sat pretty because we have everything we possibly could need. Natural gas, solar. And when not 10 seconds went by and we were good. And we didn't always have to waste on natural gas. And then, of course, it's not just weather. Authorities absolutely are concerned about extremists targeting the grid. And it just 9 key substations went down, folks. It would knock out power across the country for 18 months. If everyone was being honest with themselves, your life would be frozen in time the moment that the power went out. That's why I'm telling you, you need a solar generator. Patriot Power Generator 2000X is solar. It's portable, but it's powerful enough to power phones, other devices, medical devices for you or your loved ones, even your refrigerator. And by the way, they're stackable now, so you can add power to them, which is incredible. They have a great deal on 4 Patriots right now that ends at the end of the month, but you can stack the deal with the promo code TPP10 at checkout. TPP, obviously, for the People's Pundit, 10 for 10% off. This code is good for your first purchase only, so make it count. Like the deal that ends at the end of this month. You're already going to get a decent savings with that code, another 10% off. You're looking at massive savings. Again, forpatriots.com. Use the promo code TPP10 at checkout. All right. Yeah, and apologies for the connection there with I was trying to get this thing up that actually says yeah, Trump's in South Carolina right now. He's in a gun store, right? Yeah. That's where he's the best. He's the best when he does this stuff. Did you see? And it was painful to watch. It really was painful to watch. Let me see actually if I can. I'll find it and I'll put it up. I was gonna kind of bring this up anyway. Where are you? Where are you? I'll be honest. You should not be doing what other people are doing on the campaign trail if it's not natural to you. Okay, so Trump goes in a bar in Iowa, which his supporters then criticize him for because, of course, they're more moral and virtuous than the rest of us. God forbid you go into a bar and get a Bud Light, all right? Or not even, I hate light beer. I would never get Bud anyway, but you know what I mean. God forbid you go and get some domestic on tap or something. You're evil, and your soul is literally in peril. Okay, no, I'm joking, obviously. But yeah, there it is. And DeSantis decides after that, I'm going to go and I'm going to go into the bar too. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You have to be yourself, and you have to know how to connect yourself, because all that's going to happen is that you're going to be showed up. And yeah, Laura, yeah, she just said you really need to have your own damn original thought. You do, because then you just look inauthentic. And when we're talking about these voters, and by the way, a district like Joe Kent's district has, I was actually really surprised looking at Joe's district, how many of these groups that we've been talking about, how many votes there actually are there. And we're talking about a race that was decided by several hundred votes. I mean, that's it. There are voters there. And those kind of, well, I would say non-voters that should be voters. And those kind of people are turned off most by inauthenticity, right? And that's what makes you look like a politician. And that's what will affirm someone's suspicion that basically you'll do anything to get a vote. You'll do anything to win an office. And that's the problem. Donald Trump, he's got problems. But that is one problem he does not have. And that's what makes him so damn authentic. And I really think that if Republicans were smart, if they really wanted to win, if they really wanted not only to win, but then to have a win big enough that's secure their legacy and their agenda. Because I got to be honest with you folks, there's nothing left to conserve. That old meat locker conservatism crap is just nonsense. That wing, where I'm an ideological purist. And first of all, they're not. They're full of baloney. Number two, there's nothing left to conserve. You need to be a restorationist at this point, like John O'Shea says. He's like, I was a conservative about 10 years ago. Now I'm a restorationist. You have to restore what is already lost. You can't conserve something that's already been lost. If you want to be able to make a change like that, then the focus needs to be on getting these people. And I'm talking about something that dramatically changes the political landscape because it's there. They are there. And if you didn't watch it, go back after the show. Go watch my interview I did with Jack. And earlier when I was talking to Posobiec for his show today, this is Donald Trump's last election. For better or for worse, whether he wins or he loses. Republicans are out of time. They're almost, I would say, almost out of time to get these people. Because once he exits the electoral stage, even if he's president again, once he exits the electoral stage, and that will be the last time that someone is able to vote for Donald John Trump for president, they won't have this opportunity. Those people will vanish again. Can they get some of them? I imagine, yeah. But it'll be a trickle compared to the tidal wave that they could bring in. A trickle. They're not going to get excited to vote for Nikki Haley. They're not going to get excited to vote for Ron DeSantis. They're talking about people who haven't voted in their lives, or maybe voted once for Trump or once for Barack Obama and then voted for Trump in 16 and then thought like, they're just going to steal it in 20 and they haven't voted again since, or some of them are new and they're just totally separated from the political system. I think people need to go and dig into some of these surveys that we have been highlighting and talking about. He's the only one who can do it. 2% or something, Laura, right? Said DeSantis. I might be able to go out and vote for DeSantis. 2%. It was ridiculous. If you're going to hope to make a dent in that group, you got to have a modest target. You're not going to get them all. I'm not talking about 2%. I'm talking about 20%, 30%. And that would dramatically change the landscape. And Democrats would have nothing. They'd literally be helpless. They'd have to wait. They'd have to sit, watch, wait for it, and wait for the next realignment. And have to hope these people who are coming into the country now are going to be for them. They'd have to moderate some of their positions because those people are not social liberals who think it's okay for their daughter to get naked in front of a boy who doesn't know reality from delusion. This is a no-brainer to me. I've never seen this. Nobody's ever seen this. Even when Trump in 16 brought, it was several million, it was like 7 million more people into the electorate that hadn't voted in a long time. Even when he did that, it was nothing like this, folks. Nothing like this. And you're almost out of time, is the point. You're almost out of time. All right, hang on 1 second. Okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't have to go. I heard. We all do our best to try to carpool. We got a cool neighborhood like that. That's the way a lot of these military neighborhoods are. Anyway. I mean, it's the way it goes. Your daughter's at dance with my kid. I'll pick them up this day. You get them that day. You drop them off this day. It's called community. It's very nice, actually. But I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss my obligation, and I didn't. There was one other thing. I do want to talk to you about this Kamala Harris crap. Let's bring this up. It's not even Kamala Harris. The Gavin Newsom stuff. Biden's not going to be the nominee. We have polled every single one of them. Gavin Newsom's a weak candidate. He's a weak candidate. Also, Greg Rubini is reporting on something. This guy, James Bradley from California, put it up on Twitter, and I want to share it with you because I want to explain what this would mean if they did this, okay? And I'm not saying that Greg doesn't think he has good information. It's just, it's not this simple. Okay. Hang on. Let me get my vaporizer, and then we shall continue. All right, so Greg Rubini has reported inside info that Kamala will be forced to resign as vice president and sent to the Senate to replace Dianne Feinstein. Then Gavin Newsom will be subbed in as VP. Then they will remove Joe Biden from office. Quote, either he will die of COVID or he fell from his bicycle or whatever. One way or another, he will be forced to resign. Then Newsom will run against Trump. I have no trouble believing any of this. I have no trouble believing that people are out there concocting things that they think would be better because people are, listen, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, I explained this to book club yesterday. There were insiders in Biden's circle. Some of them believed that Biden could beat Trump again and beat him in 2020, but he'll beat him again. And then there were others who were saying, yeah, but he's a turnout monster. We don't have the infrastructure in place the way we did. It's a skeleton crew over here. For some reason, voters are just so stupid. They don't understand how great this presidency is. I kid you not. And then there were these like kind of naysayers who would shrug them off. Well, those people now are gone. All right. And I shared an article in The Hill. They are having a meltdown. They realized that Donald Trump absolutely not only can win, but it has to be considered a slight favorite at this point. Kamala Harris was specifically referenced as not being a suitable replacement in the event they do this. Nobody likes her, and everyone thinks Joe's senile. That was basically the quote, and that's true. However, Joe Biden is still the strongest candidate for two reasons. One is we've polled it. He's got something other people don't have. It's called incumbency. All right. There's still nostalgia there from the Obama era. It's true that Kamala Harris is not well liked. She runs very poorly against Donald Trump, although she does beat several of the other Republican contenders. She runs very poorly against Donald Trump. She gets killed by like 10 points and more. It's bad. Bernie Sanders is stronger than Hillary Clinton, but still weaker than I expected. Gavin Newsom has name ID issues with the overall electorate. Those who do know him, however, that are truly persuadable, don't like him. So it was a ridiculous lead. It was like Trump plus 15 or something. I'm not kidding. It was like 47-32. It was so bad. Now, that would tighten as people got to know him, but it would cause problems in the Democratic base. What they're essentially asking is for the party to come in and push out the first non-white vice president so that a yuppie rich white dude from the Bay Area, soy boy governor of California, could derail her. I said derail her. I'm sure you're ready. I said derail. That probably already went down. There's a lot of skeletons in Newsom's closet. They're disgusting. They're disgusting. Folks, I can't even say it. It's so disgusting. His wife once claimed that Harvey Weinstein raped her, and it turned out to be total BS. She slept with him for a part. She slept with him for money. She slept with him for influence. I don't know. And Laura Loomer said it, and she's right. I don't know if this makes Gavin a cuck or a pimp. I really don't know. Either way, this is not going to go over with the American people very well. And he just looks like the slimy version of the Joker before he fell in the pot of acid. All right. So I just don't think that's a very smart play. And you're going to piss off some non-white voters who do like Kamala, even though they're not going to vote for the white dude who took out their number one. She has very small support, but Democrats need all of it. They're going to need every single bit of it. And it would cause a big problem in the party if they did that. Anyway, because since 2020, it's become obvious that parties has a 3D chess game with human pieces from both parties being moved into place. So when Newsom says he won't run for president, this is what he means. The presidency will be given to him. All right, and the rest of it is what it is. DEFCON 1, yada, yada, yada. The presidency will not be given to him because he would have to beat Donald Trump for it. And I just don't see that happening. I just don't. Could it be somebody else? I guess. I'm not even going to say it out loud. But there is one. They have one particular person that wouldn't piss off those subgroups. I just don't believe it. Yeah, I mean, road trip essentially is right here. This will be so easy. That little girl was me. This would be a layup. It's like pitching underhand to Barry Bonds. Are you kidding? Unbelievable. I just don't see it. I really don't. They're in a pickle. No doubt about it. They're in a pickle. They are in a catch-22. It's a bad situation. There's not a whole lot they can do about it. But I just don't think that they would be able to go forward with that and still have a prayer in winning. The incumbent is strong for a reason. He's the strongest for a reason. And that's it, folks. I mean, that's it. Let's go over the messenger poll here. Let's go into the messaging poll. Let's go back to making sense of the polls. All right. This is a Trump +5. Suddenly all not that different from the ABC News Washington Post poll, frankly. Survey was conducted online within the United States from September 13th to 19th. We went over some of this. 3,015 registered voters. All right. And they were nationally representative sample, which means they set quotas when they did the online panel. And the results are still weighted for age, gender, region, race, ethnicity, income, ideology, and party ID where necessary to align them with their actual proportions in the population. I really don't like touching party ID. I really don't, because then how party ID is fluid, party registration is static. So if you go and look at exit polls or validated voter surveys post-elections, who did you vote for? Pew Research, whichever one. The Co-op, I like the Co-op. Whatever. VoteCast, AP VoteCast, you will see that not one electorate from one year to another looks the same, especially when it comes to party. Even though registrations don't necessarily support that. Why? Because it's people who are simply saying, I'm a Republican, even though they're registered as a Democrat. They're all over North Carolina. They're all over Pennsylvania. And not so much in Florida anymore because that's run its course. But Florida's a really good example, actually. For years, Florida was coming in R+1, R+2, even though Democrats still had a solid 2 to 4 point advantage in the voter file. So you can't, I just don't like waiting for party. In 2016, we were making that point, like I'm not touching party and we're just going to see how this goes. And what we could see was, low 10, 12% of Democrats, but still more crossover than Hillary got of Republicans, which was ironic considering how it was reported. Trump got some of them. But for the most part, there's a lot of people in Michigan who said they were Democrats and, or said they were Republicans, and they weren't. They were registered Democrats. Or what, they were in Michigan, there's no party, but something like that. They had voted Democrat for a long time. So when you run them in the voter file, they come back as an inferred Democrat. Means they vote in Democrat primaries. If you look at a county in Michigan, like Macomb County, it's still, when you run the inference model, it's still majority Democrat. I know that would blow many people's minds, but it is. It's just that those people vote for Trump and call themselves Republican. That's why no other Republican wins the damn county, guys. Anyway, if you wait for party ID, you're kind of putting your thumb on the scale. And this is a big debate. Not everybody agrees with me. It's a debate among pollsters that pollsters have been having for a while. It's just personally the way I feel. All right. You can wait for ideology. I understand that. I've seen people make that case to me. I've gone to seminars. I've seen them retroactively wait for ideology with geography to help iron it out. And by the way, all you do is let those weights, if you are implementing a rake weighting technique, you let them adjust for party. So even though your raw sample may be like D+3, when you do that, it'll come back like R+1 or something, or D+1. It will adjust other variables, other demographic variables, unless you don't allow them to. That's what rake weighting is, one variable after another. Anyway, 48% male, 52% female, 18 to 29, 16%. We're usually around 16. That's ballpark. 30 to 44, that's exactly what we're usually around, is 24%. And then, of course, the 45 to 64, which is Trump's best group, is the largest share of the electorate. 68% white, 13% black, 13% Hispanic, 6% other. Listen, I do think the electorate has the potential to be a little bit whiter. Why? Because I think that Hispanics, at least as of now, there is evidence in our polling to suggest that Hispanics will be a larger share of the electorate for the first time than African Americans, who are not growing as a population. Hispanics have been. They are the fastest growing population. The difference is, however, they don't always vote at the same rates that whites and African Americans vote. So African Americans technically are overrepresented in the national electorate. They are. And in many of the states as well. But that's because their turnout rates are really high. Hispanics haven't been able to match that, let alone surpass it. This year, there has been a change. And we have seen Hispanics, their certainty to vote surpass Black voters. And that is very interesting and something to keep an eye on. I think it's very possible Hispanics can be 15, 17, and African Americans can be 11% or 12. I really think that could happen. In the Northeast, 18%. Thank you. I just don't understand. NBC, you're guilty of this from yesterday. Maybe you're still showing a relatively tied race because your Northeastern sample is almost 30%. That's insane. 25%. It's crazy. The Northeast, eligible voters registered to vote, 17%. They vote at high rates, so I understand, 18 to 20%. We had it ourselves several times. It's ballpark around there. But this 25 and 30% share from the Northeast is crazy. The Midwest, 21, that's about right. The South, 37, that's about right, even though we've been as high as 39, 40 because they're growing. And the West, 24. You could even closely interchange that with the Midwest. They're very close sometimes. Less than 50K, 34%. 50 to 100, 30%. 100K, 33, decline to answer 3. Or 100K plus, decline to answer 3. I don't let people decline to answer. You got to tell me. Suburban, 50, that's about right. Urban, 30. Rural, 20. Strong Democrat, 30. Strong Democrat and lean Democrat, 37%. Strong Republican, lean Republican, 35%. So this is a D+2 poll. So now remember that. This is a D+2 and Trump is up by 5. The ABC News Washington Post poll was R+4 and Trump was up by 10. Either way, it was leading overwhelmingly with independents. So people are like, this is crazy. If independents voted for Biden by 9 points last time, there's no way Trump's winning them like that. Yeah, okay. And you would sound like an idiot if you made that remark in 2020. Trump won independents against Hillary Clinton. By that logic, there was no way Biden can then swing them 9 points. And the truth of the matter is, it's all in flux anyway. Trump didn't do as bad with independents as it looked. The truth is he shrunk the number of independents because many of them were just calling themselves Republicans. And by the way, many of them registered as Republicans. So there we have it. Liberal 24, that's about right. Another bone I have to pick is when they have liberals at like 30%. NBC News did that. That's crazy. Moderates 38, conservative 38. That's all about right. All right. Joe Biden's net approval is 40, net disapprove 56. Very, very, very low approval rating among Republicans. Strongly only 3, somewhat 6. That's about right. Among Democrats, his disapproval rating is combined 21% with 6% strongly disapproving. It's the independent number that is absolutely abysmal. You're talking about 34% approval with another 60% total disapproval, 40% strongly. That's really very close to what Big Data Poll's been finding recently. And that's why when we released the results, people are like, Rich, how did you still have him at 40 or 42%? Well, because until he falls into like the low 20s or teens with independents and more Democrats disapprove, it's hard to drive somebody far, down that far. He's lower than where Trump was at this point, which should be concerning for them. And he has no Russia collusion hoax hanging over his head. He's got a real problem that they're trying to cover up for. But, here we go. So, Trump's up 46 to 41. Trump leads with independents by 8, almost identical to the ABC News Washington Post poll. He wins 12% of Democrats, only giving up 7% of Republicans. And then again, that is ballpark what the ABC News Washington Post poll found. What's the difference? One is D+3, one is R+4. So it's really not that big of an outlier when you consider that. Run, not run. Biden is worse than Trump, even though they're both underwater. 69-31. Trump is 56-44. And then the Republican primary is 56 to 14. This is a problem for me. I'm not a fan of when pollsters do this. I know where he got these where they got these responses from. You can tell from the respondent's ID where they are, and you can tell whether or not they're in a state where they are in fact eligible. So we ask them on the honor system, but then we know whether or not they tell the truth. So we don't like to give you guys the overall sample, because there is no doubt there are going to be Democrats in here and independents in here that are not eligible to vote in the party's primary. The party's primary will be roughly 80% strong, solid Republican, maybe 17, 18% independent other, and then 2% Democrat. So the fact that there's a huge sample of Democrats here is, it's the unweighted sample and everything, but it's a lot. I don't like that. I like to verify whether or not somebody's eligible and likely, and then we get what we get. Although they came really close to what we have, right? But it's possible that's why DeSantis is, where a little bit higher than some others, and Vivek's a little lower. Because if you're going to include some of those votes, it's going to drag Vivek down. Others, not, but it will hurt somebody like him particularly. All right, so if Trump wasn't in the race, I mean, this would be a total ridiculous shit show. All right, I mean, it would be a joke. Look at where it is without Trump in the race. It's ludicrous. The same thing. See what I'm talking about? By the way, same thing now with the Democrats. Robert Kennedy is not at 30% in the Democratic primary. He's more like at 16%. That's right. That's more ballpark. Why? Because they're including all these other Republicans and independents. But this is something that has been holding Kennedy back for a while. He does do well with independents who are eligible to vote in the Democratic primary. The problem is they move the schedule around to keep the closed front loaded, to keep the non-white front loaded, and he's not breaking in with Democrats themselves, or liberals for that matter. If you look by ideology, and you would no doubt see the same thing. All right, so he has to do that because of the way the nominating contests go. He's got to break into more non-white, since they're going to be a huge chunk of the Democratic primary and caucus vote. Well, primary, really, but except for Nevada. Oh, that's right. They voted to move theirs too. So Nevada is a primary again. So there you have it. Point I was trying to make, though, is showing you how, pollsters' qualifications, how their screens can impact the overall result. And in the case of ABC and the Washington Post, they got a much more Republican sample because they very clearly got those adults that are not registered, that lean to the right. All this research shows they're a gold mine for the Republican Party. And then the obvious registered, but they're unlikely. Biden Democrats, they do better with likely models now. They just do. And because ABC did it that way, they got a much more Republican sample. The difference in the vote with independents is not that different. He's winning them by roughly the same margin. The real difference here is that this is a modeled D+3. ABC was modeled R+4. Wasn't even really modeled. They don't do that. They just have normal demographics, and it tells them what their party split is. All right. So yeah, I think that's about through and through here. So that's where it's at. I'll give it one more take, see what else we might have had here get put up. I'm not saying that I think Trump's lead is. I just want to make this clear. I'm not saying that I think Trump's lead is that big. I think it's probably the Harvard X poll is, probably closer. Our last one was Trump +1. I'm dying to get back into the field so we can see what's what. All right. I don't know. I saw people saying, let's fund the Georgia poll so we can shut certain people up. Go ahead. But the national poll's got to get done as well. And funny enough, Poso was like, where's the Rust Belt poll? I could ask more about the Rust Belt poll than anything else. I'm probably going to just oversample the Rust Belt states when we do national, so we can do the national poll and then also have larger oversamples for the Rust Belts. So kind of be done at the same time, basically. All right. DeSantis will debate Gavin Newsom next month. Is this the move of a confident campaign, Jackson? No. I mean, this is a ploy, a gimmick. He didn't want, when he was doing better in the polls, he didn't want to debate Gavin Newsom. Right? He wasn't interested in doing that. This is a gimmick. We got the debate this week. I'm going to try. Let me just do, because I guess we could kick rocks here. I just want to give you guys a couple of things. Obviously, we're going to have the show on Wednesday. I'm going to leave Thursday. So I will try to be able to do the show Friday, even if it's like ghetto fabulous from a hotel room. I will try to do it Friday and before I go on Timcast, right? Because I'm going to be on Tim Pool on Friday. Friday morning, Talk of the Town for local NCs. So I'll be on Talk of the Town Friday morning at 8:30, which is always awesome. I love that show. Everybody in this state loves that show. Everybody listens to Talk of the Town. It's a big deal. I kid you not. First time I ever went on Talk of the Town, I get done. I'm like, honey, I'll be right back. I got to run to Ace Hardware. I asked the guy about something. He's like, dude, you're the guy from, you say something else. And I'm like, where's the weed killer, you know? Or actually that day, Laura, I think I was looking for like pipe fittings, right? For the pool thing. And he's like, you're the People's Pundit dude who was just talking to Henry on Talking to Town. I'm like, oh my God, everyone watches this show. I go to the storage unit and they're like, hey, listen, everybody loves that show. So if you're a local person, you get it. You know what I'm talking about. If you're not, it's a cool show. You could watch it on Facebook if you wanted. It's always a good one. And so, yeah, I think I'm going to try to squeeze in the normal show on Friday, even if it's just popping in. Let's do the Q&A, answer some questions, go from there. If that's the way it is, then that's the way it is, and we'll make it work. But yeah, we'll be on Tim Pool on Friday. Yep, you heard that correctly. Yes, sir. And ma'am. See, this comment here. Ross Perot and Ron Paul were the ones who woke me up and woke me up completely. And what do they have in common, right? They are not typical politicians. So that doesn't surprise me that I would hear you say that or write that. All right, so let's we'll probably go ahead. We can end it here because I do have something. I can't share it with you guys yet, but I will soon enough. But I got to wrap it up and get it done. You'll find it incredibly interesting. Hopefully, I'll be able to share it with you real soon. Anything else I'm missing here, Laura? I don't think so. All right, go check out Jack, which I was on, but we kind of we railroaded Jack. Special thanks to Joe Ken who came on. That was a good interview even without the camera. I was happy to have him on during this, and it was an important time to have him revisit. He is making that push for the end of the month. What he said is really, really important about the fundraising stuff. Campaigns like him are really run off the salt of the earth. People like you, people like you. These bigger donors who are giving all these monies to PACs right now, they don't help, MAGA the way that they help rhinos. And many of them will cry poor the minute this thing ends and they pivot to a general election. I'm telling you. So go check out his website. Also, don't forget to sign up to locals. I got asked before, which would I rather, YouTube or locals? I would rather locals, without a doubt. I would rather you sign up, peoplespundit.locals.com. And don't forget as well to go to the public polling project, which you can get to right on locals. It'll say, learn about our polls, and you can click right on it and check it out. There's been a lot of changes on the website lately. I think they're cool. I really do. But you can now simply get to the public polling project by going to Big Data Poll, checking out the menu, which is the fly menu on the left. It's a slide-in menu, and you'll look right down in there, right where there's clients. They have their portal. But below that, you can go to the public polling project. And then there's a lot of, obviously, repeat givers. Your donor dashboard is right under that. You see where you can do this public polling project, and you can click on it and go right to it. But then there's the drop down. And the donor dashboard and your donor history is right there. All right. So you'll be able to go and get a copy of whatever you wanted. Obviously, it's not tax deductible, but you can check it out. I wish it was. I wish it was a 503c or something, but I don't. It's not. I don't think it's appropriate. All right. So there it is. You see it? Donor dashboard to the left, donor history. You can click right on them. You can go to this page, Public Polling Project, by clicking here. But then I get a lot of emails like, hey, can you send me a receipt for it? And yeah, and it automatically sent you one, but sometimes they end up in the spam folder. Here, you could just go right to your dashboard, check it out, check out your history, and then also download a receipt. Okay. So yeah, where we are, I mean, you can see we got a ways to go. Georgia's at like 19%. The Nationals at like 9%. We got some time. And you know me. Once I see us get kind of close, I'll pull the trigger and I'll do it. I see Georgia's probably going to beat the National, but you got to get kind of close. All right. So with that in mind, I'm going to kick rocks and I'll see you on Wednesday. All right. Remember, you don't need to wait for some massive infrastructure plan to go out and get some of these people we've been talking about. Hey, you're registered to vote. You're sitting in an aisle in, Publix or something. It's like, damn, that apple is expensive. When did a Honeycrisp apple get to be $8? Well, you're registered to vote. That's the way you do it, folks. Yes, I'm suggesting you bother people in the grocery store. That's exactly what I'm suggesting. All right, I think that's it. See you on Wednesday. Stay safe. Stay cool. Thanks for watching. I don't know. And again, thanks for joking. All the best, folks.